Let me start with a strange question. What if everything you've been taught about winning, striving hard, crushing the competition, always being one step ahead, was actually keeping you from true power? What if the most powerful way to win was to not fight at all? That's the paradox at the heart of a 500-year-old philosophy that's been whispered through the centuries, influencing emperors, warriors, thinkers, and even billionaires today. But it's not loud. It doesn't shout. It flows. It doesn't conquer by force. It dissolves resistance. And if you're paying attention, it's not just a philosophy. It's a survival strategy for modern life. So today we're going to explore the ancient path of winning without violence, without forcing outcomes. And as strange as it sounds, it might just be the most dangerous power you can possess. The philosophy begins with this radical idea. The best way to win is by aligning with what already is. This comes straight from the heart of Taoism, particularly the Tao Te Ching, written by Laozi over 2 millennia ago. He observed that water, soft, yielding, formless, can carve through rock over time, that the sky, empty and still, contains everything, that the oak tree breaks in a storm but the reed bends and survives. And from this observation, he taught something that sounds almost mystical but is deeply practical. The more you resist the natural flow of life, the more it resists you. But if you move with it, if you use its momentum, if you flow like water, you become unstoppable, not through domination, but through harmony. Imagine winning by becoming the path of least resistance. Imagine succeeding by not clashing with the world, but by understanding it so deeply that it carries you forward like a river carries a boat. But here's where it gets mind-bending. This philosophy doesn't tell you to be passive. It tells you to be precise. You don't withdraw from life. You withdraw from unnecessary struggle. Think of how much energy people waste trying to control others, prove their value, or force outcomes that aren't ready to happen. This is the tragedy of modern ambition. We are constantly pushing, striving, competing, burning out, trying to win in a way that's invisible to any natural rhythm. And the results? Anxiety, disconnection, a sense that no matter how hard we try, we're still behind. But what if the real masters don't push? What if they wait, observe, adapt? What if they win without ego, without noise, without needing to be seen? Think about that. Is it still success if no one sees you win, but you gain everything you truly needed?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
This is the art of non-action, Wu-Wai. Not inaction, but non-forced action. Doing without forcing, moving without pushing. It sounds ethereal, but it's incredibly grounded. Let me give you an example. A master swordsman doesn't fight every opponent. In fact, he avoids most fights entirely. His power comes not from constant conflict, but from knowing when not to engage. In life, this means choosing your battles with surgical clarity. It means not taking every invitation to argue, not reacting to every trigger, not collapsing into emotional chaos every time plans shift. Instead, you move like a shadow, calm, responsive, alert. Success becomes less about effort and more about timing, less about force and more about form. And in this way, you conserve energy, you make better decisions, and you gain an advantage so subtle that others don't even realize you're winning until it's too late. So here's the big question we face together. Are you willing to stop chasing and start aligning? Because that's what this philosophy demands. It demands that you stop being the hammer and start being the wind, that you stop seeking validation and start seeking truth, that you stop forcing outcomes and start flowing with what is. And this takes an unbelievable amount of self-control. It's not passive. It's not weak. It's a form of internal mastery that few people ever reach. But those who do, those who win without, they don't just succeed. They transcend. They become invisible forces in the world, shaping events not through noise, but through presence. And if you can start to feel that shift in yourself, even now you're already stepping onto the path. The invisible blade, Why the most powerful person is the one who doesn't need to show power. There's a moment in every truly transformative journey where you realize that real power doesn't look like what we've been told. It doesn't come from domination, loudness, or visibility. Real power, lasting, silent, unshakable power comes from restraint, from stillness, from the ability to act without needing to prove anything. The 500-year-old philosophy we're exploring teaches exactly this. It tells us that the most powerful person in the room is rarely the one speaking the most. It's the one who doesn't need to speak. It's the one whose presence alters the room before they even say a word. And here's the paradox. The less you need to prove your strength, the stronger you become. Laozi didn't write the Tao Te Ching as a flex. He wrote it in retreat, in silence, as he was leaving society behind. And yet, his words have outlived empires. What does that tell us about the nature of true influence? In today's world, we're conditioned to signal everything. Our wins, our status, our opinions, our outrage. But signaling is not strength. It's often a cover for insecurity. The Taoist master, the true sage, doesn't signal. They simply are. They walk into the room and you feel it. Not because they demand your attention, but because they've cultivated such deep internal alignment that the world adjusts around their presence. This is what I call the invisible blade. It's the kind of power you don't see until it's already shaped the outcome. It's the strategy that never reveals itself, because it never had to. And this idea is not just poetic, it's tactical. In business, in relationships, even in conflict, the person who doesn't reveal all their moves, who doesn't overreact, who doesn't need to be right, wins. They win because they remain adaptable, unreadable, and unshaken. And this idea is revolutionary when applied to modern life. Think about how much energy we waste reacting, defending ourselves, correcting others, trying to hold on to an identity we think we must protect. But what if you didn't have to defend yourself at all? What if your power came from simply being rooted, so deeply rooted in purpose, truth, and clarity that no attack could destabilize you? That's not just philosophy, that's a superpower. And it's what the ancient masters were trying to teach us. When you're not driven by ego, you stop needing to fight every battle. You choose your actions with precision. You wait, you observe. And when you act, it's devastatingly effective, not because it was loud, but because it was inevitable. So I'll ask you this, what would your life look like if you stopped reacting and started responding with purpose? This is how we begin to win without rage, without fear, without the external validation that keeps most people on a leash. You stop chasing victory, and you start becoming the kind of person who attracts it. And not just any victory, the right kind. The kind that aligns with who you are, not who you're pretending to be. This ancient philosophy isn't about escaping life. It's about mastering it from within. It's about becoming so inwardly complete that you no longer need to prove anything outwardly. And in that space, you become unpredictable. Untouchable. The invisible blade isn't about hiding your power. It's about being so powerful that you no longer need to show it. And when you reach that point when you no longer need to win to feel worthy, you've already won in the deepest possible way. The paradox of surrender, how letting go becomes the ultimate advantage. Here's the hardest truth of all. To truly win without, you must be willing to let go. Not just of outcomes, but of control. Not just of control, but of identity. And that's terrifying because we've been taught from the start that control is safety and identity is everything. But Laozi flips that completely. He says it's in surrender, not weakness, that we find our greatest strength, not submission, not resignation, but the kind of surrender that comes when you're so in tune with the flow of things that you no longer resist what is. And suddenly, the world begins to open up. The tension drops. The pressure dissolves. You stop trying to force the river to move, and instead, you become the river. And in doing so, you start to move effortlessly toward what is meant for you, not what your ego demanded. This kind of surrender is not passive. It's not giving up, it's giving in to reality. It's trusting that your path doesn't require you to strangle it into submission. That your timing, your opportunities, your breakthroughs, they're not things you chase. They are things you meet when you stop obstructing them with fear and ego. Think about it. How many times have you held on to a job, a relationship, a version of yourself, just because you were afraid to lose? But what if losing was exactly what needed to happen for you to be free? The ancient sages knew this. They knew that real security doesn't come from holding on. It comes from knowing what to release. So I'll ask you the final question of this journey. What are you still gripping so tightly that it's cutting off your own growth? Winning without isn't about having less ambition. It's about having cleaner ambition. It's about aiming without desperation, acting without ego, letting go without fear. And when you live like that, your life becomes clear. You begin to move differently, speak differently, even breathe differently. You become someone who doesn't need to fight because you've already mastered the war within. You don't need the world's approval because you've already approved of who you are. And in that space, you begin to win, not through force, but through gravity, through alignment, through presence. That's the 500-year-old secret. When you stop needing to win, you become unbeatable, because nothing can be taken from someone who has already let go. And that is the ultimate advantage.